These days, every job is a technology job. Whether you're a programmer, a marketer, or even just someone who sits down in front of a computer every day, you have a stake in the tapestry of the technology industry. Welcome to Wits and Wisdom, a podcast sharing insights, innovations, and inspiration from the award-winning Women in Tech Summit. Join host Gloria Bell, founder of the Women in Tech Summit, multi-hyphenate entrepreneur, and advocate for equity and equality in tech as she sits down with extraordinary guests from the WITS community. Listen in as they discuss wisdom from their career journeys, pro tips from their areas of expertise, and sneak previews of the biggest upcoming tech trends. This is Wits and Wisdom, a podcast from the Women in Tech Summit and Inspiring Tech Foundation.
Hello, and welcome to Wits and Wisdom, a podcast sharing insights, innovations, and inspiration from the award-winning Women in Tech Summit. I'm your host, Gloria Bell, founder of WITS and the Inspiring Tech Foundation. Today, we're speaking with Pamela Sams, first-time speaker here at WITS Midatlantic, where we are live with all of our speakers, attendees, and you're probably hearing a little bit of the hustle and bustle in the background as everyone is settling in to learn from all of our wonderful speakers, sponsors, and everyone here getting a chance to network. But Pamela is a winner of the 5-Star Wealth Management Award and BFA, CRPC, and MBA Trusted Advisor for Professional Women. Wow, Pamela, that is a whole alphabet soup there. Can you let our listeners know what some of those letters stand for?
Yes, thank you very much for having me on the podcast today. A slew of information always accompanies any financial advisor with designations. So the first one is BFA. It does not stand for Bachelor of Fine Arts. It is actually a behavioral financial advisor designation. So I do a lot of work with behavioral finance with my clients. CRPC is a chartered retirement planning counselor. So I specialize in retirement planning and retirement income planning for my clients. And then, of course, regular MBA. So I do have a master's in business administration.
So you are very well qualified. And I love that what you're speaking about today at WITS is actually some emerging tech in the financial services. I have to say, when your proposal came through our call for speakers, it immediately got my attention because someone who is that well qualified in financial services that is also watching what's happening in tech, I was like, this is somebody we need to hear from. We're very, very excited that you joined us here at WITS Midatlantic, especially with it being our first time back in person post-COVID. So congratulations on your first time speaking with us. I know you get to speak at a lot of other places. So I'm very excited you chose this to be one of them. Was there anything that kind of set WITS apart that made you decide that you wanted to speak at this conference?
Anything that deals with women in tech, definitely want to be represented there, especially the talk that I was giving on the emerging technologies, just like the shirt that you have on that says more women in tech. In my talk, I did actually talk about some of the virtual reality things that I saw that I have been engaged in recently. And being it's Women's History Month, it's also the opportunity to celebrate women in VR. And it was only maybe 2 or 3 people that were really represented in there. And I said there needs to be more women creating these immersive worlds as well. And then I jokingly talked about the hairstyle choices that they had on the avatars. I said definitely need to have more women in tech. To say that we're more than 2 or 3 hairstyles when we're on our virtual reality and our VR our avatars. We want to look presentable. So anything that deals with women in tech, I am really a big proponent of. So when I saw WITS, and of course it being in my own backyard here in the DC metro area, I definitely had to take advantage.
Wonderful. I'm very glad you did. And obviously your speaker submission caught our attention because we selected you to speak. So give us a peek into how you crafted it, like some tips on how you put your speaker submission together. Mm-hmm. Let's give our listeners something to think about when they're putting theirs together.
Exactly. And you have to know your audience on who you're going to speak to. And then anything that is innovative or a hot topic or things that people are talking about, you really want to make sure you represent it there. That's why I talked about emerging technology, because everybody's probably heard of ChatGPT and all of the other things that are occurring in a variety of different industries. And I thought my take on it from a financial services part, because a lot of times people think, and I talked about it in my talk, that financial services is so staunch and nobody's innovating anything. Everything is about dollars and cents. But in the financial industry, we've been tech forward, really looking at some opportunities to bring in AI and the metaverse and VR for a variety of different ways to engage with our clients. So that was the spin that I took on the proposal here, because a lot of people may not have known what is actually going on in financial services with some of the emerging technology.
And it clearly was a good spin to take, because it definitely caught our eye for that very reason, was you were looking at something very different, and it was not the typical proposal that we saw. Can I ask you, now that you have spoken at WITS, going to ask you, take us on a little bit of a tour of how you got ready to come speak here. So talk got submitted, you got accepted, we're coming up on the event actually happening. So what steps did you take to prepare?
Rehearsing a lot, especially if people aren't used to public speaking, because it can be daunting for some people as well. I've done public speaking for quite some time now, so I'm used to it. But for those who are not, really making sure they practice after they get a really tight slide deck. Also understanding kind of the time constraints. That's what I see a lot of times, is that you have 45 minutes, but you may want to look at maybe 30, 35 or 40 minutes to just for any time for questions or Q&A. Mine probably went right at about 40, and then I had some really engaging questions afterwards. It took me right at about time to do that. So really making sure you have that. If there are any interactive parts of your conversation, I like to ask questions throughout my presentation on who has experienced this, or what have you done in this particular area. So for example, with my talk, I talked about my tech journey. And so I talked about, those old AOL discs that we used to get in the mail and dial up with the bonbon, and that sort of thing to get on the internet. And I told people that the young people, they probably had no clue, because Wi-Fi is everywhere, and never had to painstakingly 15 to 20 minutes waiting to get on the internet. So really engaging the audience as well with some things that would allude to some things they experience as well, to really make sure you're engaging the audience, that they are rooting for you, but then you're also a person where you're just having a conversation with them, and it's not so much really talking at them, really getting them engaged as well.
How do you prepare for those times when maybe your audience isn't quite as engaged?
I always make sure, because I love to add humor to my presentations, and so that kind of warms people up, because it's always something that resonates with them enough to say, hey, yeah, that's happened to me, or yes, I have experienced that.
Everybody has those moments where they're not quite sure where the audience is. And humor is a great way to get through those moments, because it can be tough standing up there sometimes. Anything that, whether it was today or another time that you have been speaking, where you thought maybe there was something else I should have done to prepare, that maybe like a tip that you want to give first-timers, or something that you learned as a first-time speaker?
For this particular conference, or just in general?
Let's start with this conference.
Okay.
And then we'll go to in general.
I got it. All right. Definitely check anything that you're going to give out. I had a faux pas with one of my QR codes. So definitely make sure you check on the flow of anything that you're going to present on that. I was able to kind of salvage myself with giving them the URL on it, but make sure you have accuracy in your data. One of the presentations I was listening to a little bit earlier, she used, in a women's tech conference, she had a lot of men represented on her slides, and someone called her out on that. So Make sure you also have inclusivity. If you're going to be at a women's conference, that you have representation as well. So you want to make sure you prepare in that instance. Also, diversity, making sure there's enough people represented. In my presentation, most of it was computers and AI and that sort of thing. But if you do have people, you want to also make sure there's diversity in your presentation.
That is really great reminders. Sometimes we default to stock photos. And while there's some really great stock photography out there, it's not always the most diverse stock photography out there.
Exactly. And, another tip is because of that, you do want to also make sure you have your slide deck reviewed by someone else because you're so close to it a lot of times, and you want to practice in front of someone. Do they understand it? In a tech conference, of course, it can be really tech heavy, but if somebody is the lay person, is it too heavy where they may not be able to understand? Also picking out some of those diversity issues, some things that you may not have. Some of the references, a lot of times, I belong to Innovation Women. I know you gave Bobby Carlton a shout out, so I've been a member for 3 years. One of the things you have to consider as well, if you have global audience, some of the things may not hit right. Some of the phrases we may use. I felt victim of that, not in a speaking situation, but just speaking with a client who was from another country. She's been a U.S. citizen for quite some time, but I used the phrase, put a bug in your ear. And so she was like, huh? Like, what does that mean? And so you have to be aware of certain references that you use, or things like that, phrases that may not land with a certain audience.
All great pieces of advice. So when you either were applying to speak or once you got here to speak, was there anything that you thought was going to be really challenging, but then you realized it wasn't quite as challenging or maybe even was easy?
With any speaking engagement, you're always concerned about what the room is going to look like or how the tech is going to work. So it was very simple with bring your own laptop and just plug and play, and then there you have your slides. So I had backup. I had my HDMI cables. I had everything on a thumb drive just in case, because I've been to presentations where you get there and there's nothing there, or they said things were going to be there, but they're not. So this one was really easy. Just bring your laptop and plug in your HDMI and you're good to go.
One last question. Words of encouragement for any first-time speakers at the Women in Tech Summit.
I would say have fun. Have fun with it. It's a great audience. Everybody's engaged. Everybody's here to learn. As any speaker, the audience is rooting for you. So don't be afraid to make a mistake. You are a human person, and so if something comes up and you miss a slide or you have a little fumble, don't worry about it. Just have fun.
So, Pamela, because you have such great advice and such a great program for professional women, and that's who a lot of our listeners are, how can our listeners get in touch with you?
Yes, they can contact me on social media. I'm represented there on Twitter at Jackson Sams WS because they limit the characters there. And then on Instagram and Facebook at Jackson Sams Wealth, and they can follow me there. And in LinkedIn, I am Pamela Sams, Pamela J. Sams, and they'll be able to reach me there and connect on LinkedIn.
Okay, and what is the full name of your company?
The full name of my company is Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies.
Fantastic. So they can Google you and they can find your company and contact you there too.
Yes, they can.
Is there anything you have coming up? Any speaking events, anything else? Your program possibly you have coming up that you want to give a shout out, make sure people know about?
I actually have a couple coming up. I will be in Chicago at the Retirement Income Summit, talking all about time segmentation and retirement planning. So I have that one coming up in April. And then in May, I'll be at the Wealth Management Edge, also talking about some tech stack things there and financial services. And that one is in Miami, so I'll be there in May.
Awesome. Shaking up all those financial advisors with all the tech stuff and making their heads spin.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
We've had a great conversation, Gloria, and I appreciate the time that we had together and wish everybody luck who wants to apply for WITS in the future, and everybody have a wonderful conference.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pamela, for joining us. Thank you to our listeners for joining us at this live edition of Wits and Wisdom here at WITS Midatlantic. We encourage you to visit womenintechsummit.com and check out the rest of our 2023 programming. You can join us at one of our upcoming summits in Philadelphia, Chicago, our virtual summit, in Denver or in Raleigh. And we hope to see you in person at one of those events, or we hope to see you at the next episode of Wits and Wisdom.
Ready to learn more about the Women in Tech Summit? Visit our website at womenintechsummit.net. That's womenintechsummit.net to view our most up-to-date event schedules, calls for speakers, and sponsorship opportunities. If you enjoyed this episode, bookmark the show, give us a follow, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us educate, inspire, and connect with even more movers and shakers within and beyond the technology industry. Thanks for listening, and see you here again soon on Wits and Wisdom, a podcast from the Women in Tech Summit and the Inspiring Tech Foundation.